Yes.
No. Okay, I pick a number. Yeah, I pick 5.
Hopefully number 5.
3.
You fed everybody in there.
4. 5.
Is it really me?
Yeah.
I can't see it. I can't see it.
Yeah.
So the question for E is assess Theodore Roosevelt's conduct of American foreign policy, especially in Latin America and Asia. Did it result in more harm than good to all concerned, or vice versa? Justify your conclusion. Well, Theodore Roosevelt, he was all about foreign affairs mainly because he thought that America should be strong and be ready for any, any potential harm to the country. And he's known for, pretty much, people think that he likes war. I think he likes war. So when he got involved in, Latin America and Asia, I think I read from, I forgot where I read it from, but I read it on this online article about Theodore Roosevelt and how he settled a dispute between, I think, France and Russia. I don't know. I know it was Europe, but then it was over Morocco, and he also settled the dispute between Japan and Russia, I think, about Manchuria and Korea, I think. And so I guess in those cases, it was good, but when it came to the Cubans and the Filipinos, I think that overall, at first I thought that it was kind of more good that happened, because even though a lot of lives were taken away and a lot of lives were taken away. Now I'm starting to sway more to the side that it was more harmful, because in the end, instead of liberating the Cubans and the Filipinos, they were kept in, it was ironic, because they were supposed to be liberating them, and yet they did what the Spanish did to them.
Wait, but on that one, for the Filipino, I read in a pageant that they said that they would have let the Filipino become independent, but then if Philippines became independent, they said that what if Russia took over them, and the same thing's gonna happen to them too. So that's the United States didn't want them to be independent as their own nation.
I still think that it didn't really do good, because after that, it's kind of they were left thinking, what are we going to use them for? And they pretty much just kept them around only because they were afraid that the other powers would take over.
I have to agree more with that. Roosevelt, as a strong and brave character, he did more good than any other president has ever done. I mean, honestly, even though he might have added to the bad neighbor policy, by adding the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe document, he stops South America from being dominated by the Europeans. I mean, that's awesome, because if the Europeans were to gain control here, I mean, America would be dead. I mean, they could plan an invasion and actually take away parts of America. And I also believe that it did more good overall, because even though we were an imperialistic nation, honestly, every other nation was an imperialistic nation too. I mean, the British, the French, Austria, Prussia, or Russia, and what we did wasn't as bad as what they did in Africa, and it was thanks to his policies that influenced the later release of the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Africa.
Yeah, and I agree on the part where it's, when you look back and think now, it did more good, but at the time, when it says to all that were concerned, I think that it was harmful at that time because of the many lives that were lost, and but overall, yeah, it was an imperial era, and people were doing just the United States, and that's just how how it goes. So I guess that's where I qualify in this on whether or not it's harmful or good.
I would have to disagree with you because they said during the war, only about in the pageant 100 to 200 lives were actually killed by the war in Cuba, and more than, I think it was 50% was actually killed by disease. So it was more of Mother Earth going against humans than man versus man.
It sounded like they were all ill and had to be transported.
May I interject a question toward Nikki? So Nikki, you were saying that your first impression of this question, at first you began to think that it was a good decision for Theodore Roosevelt to go into war for the Cubans, but then you felt that it ended up being a negative because you said that the United States began to act as Spain had acted. Can you give me examples, and can you tell me if Spain and the United States, when you look at Spain's treatment of the Cubans and the United States after the Spanish-American War and its treatment of its imperial possessions, how would the treatment be the same as Spain, and how would it be different? And I want Enrique to listen to your answer and then reply if that would be okay.
I forgot where I read it in, if it was in AMSCO or pageant, but then it talked about how, or was it the video we watched? I remember it was from my recent learnings, but they said they compared the Americans to the Spanish, but I don't think it was as bad as the Spanish because I don't feel like American motives are intended badly. And I guess there's two sides to it because the Cubans, they wanted to be liberated, and after they just wanted to be set free on their own. But Americans didn't see it that way, and it's specific. I forgot from where I got it, but they talked about the irony of how it happened, about how Americans, I think they had to settle revolts, but those who rebelled were killed too. So yeah, so that's why I think that it was harmful. But I guess my initial reaction to this question was that it was good because it was Theodore Roosevelt, and I heard and how everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people think he's a good president, and yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you is, if the United States treated its imperial possessions the same way as the Spanish had, was it the same? Was it different? How was it the same? How is it different? Can you think of some people, maybe from the video yesterday, that would explain some of the treatments the Spanish had inflicted upon the Cubans?
I think when the Americans settled imperial Cuba, or control, it wasn't as bad as the Spanish. The Spanish was starving people to death and stuff like that. The Spanish were killing the main leaders in Cuba. But what the U.S. did was also, they were also trying to control Cuba. And Theodore Roosevelt used Cuba as an excuse to go to war with Spanish, to take Cuba away, and control himself, and control Cuba by himself. Or control it. And that's why Cuba really hates the U.S.
Okay, Nikki, would you like to ask, pick a number 1 to 6?
What about Melina?
Oh, yeah, she had the question.
Oh, Melina, your friends.
Right,
Would you like to respond, Melina?
She basically said
And may I ask you another question that kind of feeds off of her question then? My question would be, so in the midst of this conversation, I heard some discussion about other powers on the planet. It wasn't just the Spanish who had